In a quiet part of the United States, far from the noise of big cities, there lived an elderly couple who believed deeply in family, hard work, and staying together through every season of life. The grandfather was a disciplined man who had spent decades working with his hands, never complaining, never asking for more than what he earned. The grandmother, soft-spoken yet strong, held the family together with patience and warmth. They had raised their only daughter with care, teaching her respect, honesty, and the importance of standing by loved ones no matter how difficult life became. When she grew up and married a hardworking man from the city, the grandparents felt a deep sense of relief and pride. The wedding was simple, not filled with luxury but rich in love. Friends and family gathered, laughter echoed through the small hall, and the grandparents believed their daughter was stepping into a secure and happy future. In the years that followed, their daughter gave birth to 2 children, a son and later a daughter. The grandparents' world changed completely. Every visit was filled with joy. They watched their grandson take his first steps, listened to their granddaughter's laughter, and imagined long years ahead filled with family gatherings and shared memories. Life was not perfect, but it was peaceful. The young couple worked hard, paid their bills, and created a loving home for their children. The grandparents often said that happiness did not come from money, but from sitting at the same table and eating together. At that time, no one imagined how fragile that happiness really was, or how quickly it could be taken away without warning. As the years passed, the family settled into a steady routine. The grandparents enjoyed watching their grandchildren grow, noticing how different their personalities were becoming. The grandson was active and curious, always running, always asking questions, while the granddaughter was calm and observant, often sitting quietly beside her grandmother. The parents worked long hours but never neglected family time. Evenings were spent together, sharing meals, talking about school, and planning small dreams for the future. Holidays were especially meaningful, bringing everyone together under one roof. When the daughter turned 7 and the son was just 4 years old, they were still innocent, believing that parents were permanent and life was predictable. Their father was their protector, their mother their comfort. The grandparents looked at this family and felt grateful that their sacrifices had led to such a peaceful life. But fate does not announce itself before arriving. One ordinary morning, everything changed. The father was driving through the city when a sudden car accident took his life. There was no chance to say goodbye. The phone call came early, cutting through the silence like a knife. By the time the grandparents reached the hospital, it was over. Their daughter's world collapsed in a single moment. She became a widow before she was ready, and her children lost their father before they could even understand what death meant. The house that once echoed with laughter became painfully quiet. Bills continued to arrive, indifferent to grief. Within a year, the financial pressure became unbearable. Rent, food, school expenses, everything demanded money she didn't have. Nights became sleepless, filled with fear and unanswered questions. Survival replaced comfort, and desperation slowly began shaping her choices. As the months passed after her husband's death, the weight of responsibility slowly crushed the mother's spirit. She was no longer just grieving, she was fighting a daily battle to survive. Every morning she woke up with fear sitting heavy in her chest. Fear of unpaid bills, fear of eviction, fear of not being able to give her children even the basics. The grandparents helped as much as they could, but their own resources were limited. The mother worked wherever she could, but the income was never enough. Late at night, when her children were asleep, she stared at the ceiling, wondering how a life that once felt secure had become so fragile. It was during this vulnerable time that she met a man who offered what sounded like stability. He spoke confidently, promised financial support, and assured her that her children would never suffer again. Exhausted and desperate, she convinced herself that this was the only path forward. She remarried, not out of love, but out of fear and responsibility. At first, she tried to believe she had made the right choice. But soon the truth revealed itself in painful ways. The man was deeply addicted to pornography, spending hours consumed by his desires, disconnected from reality and family life. What hurt even more was that he often brought young college girls into the house for his personal needs, treating the home like a place of indulgence rather than safety. Each time it happened, the mother felt her dignity shatter a little more. She avoided eye contact, avoided conversation, and learned to swallow her pain in silence. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt unsafe, unpredictable, and emotionally toxic. The children noticed everything. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they sensed the tension, the discomfort and the sadness in their mother's eyes. They stopped inviting friends over. They stayed quiet. The grandparents, living at a distance, felt something was wrong but could not see the full picture. The mother felt trapped. Leaving meant losing financial support and risking homelessness. Staying meant enduring humiliation. Every day she told herself she was doing this for her children's future. But deep inside she knew that no future built on fear and shame could ever be truly safe. The realization grew slowly but painfully clear. Money could provide shelter, but it could never replace respect, peace, or dignity. The turning point did not come with shouting or drama, but with a quiet moment of clarity that settled deep in the mother's heart. One evening, after yet another painful reminder of the life she was trapped in, she looked at her children and realized that staying was teaching them the wrong lesson. They were learning that suffering was normal, that silence was strength, and that dignity could be traded for comfort. That night, when the house finally fell quiet, she packed what little she could. There were no grand plans, no savings hidden away, only a desperate faith that leaving was better than continuing to endure. Before sunrise, she took her son and daughter by the hand and stepped out of that house, leaving behind not just a man, but an entire chapter of shame and fear. The journey back to her parents' home felt long and uncertain, filled with guilt, relief, and fear all at once. When the grandparents opened their door and saw their daughter standing there with her children, they did not ask questions. They did not judge. The grandmother embraced her tightly while the grandfather silently took the bags inside. Their home was small, already stretched by age and limited income, but love made space where money could not. The children slept peacefully that night for the first time in months, unaware of how close their mother had come to breaking. The next morning marked the beginning of a new struggle. The mother began working in other people's homes, cleaning floors, washing dishes, caring for children and elderly strangers. Some days she returned home exhausted, her body aching, her spirit tested. But she carried pride in her exhaustion, knowing it came from honest work. The grandparents helped in every way they could, watching the children, preparing meals, offering quiet encouragement. They were not wealthy, only middle class, but their values were strong. Slowly the house filled with warmth again. Laughter returned, not loud or careless, but real. Though life remained difficult, the family felt safe. For the first time in years, hope quietly took root, built on sacrifice, love, and the belief that dignity was worth fighting for. Life in the grandparents' house followed a rhythm shaped by necessity and resilience. The days began early, often before sunrise, as the mother prepared herself for another long day of work. She moved from one house to another, cleaning kitchens that were not her own, washing clothes for families who barely noticed her presence, and caring for elderly people who reminded her of her own parents waiting at home. Each dollar she earned was carefully counted, stretched to cover food, school supplies, and basic needs. The work was physically exhausting and emotionally draining, but it gave her something she had lost for a long time: control over her life. At night, she returned home tired but honest, greeted by the quiet comfort of her parents' small house and the familiar faces of her children. The grandparents played a crucial role during these years. Though age had slowed their bodies, their spirits remained strong. The grandfather helped the children with schoolwork, teaching them discipline and responsibility, while the grandmother filled the home with warmth, stories, and gentle guidance. They made sure the children understood the value of respect, patience, and gratitude. The family did not have much, but meals were shared together and no one ever felt alone. Slowly, the children began to heal from the instability they had experienced. The grandson became more focused, taking school seriously, while the granddaughter grew more confident, finding comfort in routine and safety. Despite the hardship, the mother refused to let bitterness define her. She spoke carefully around her children, shielding them from her pain, choosing strength over anger. There were nights when fear returned, worries about the future, about money, about whether her sacrifices would be enough. But each morning she rose again, driven by the belief that this struggle was temporary. The grandparents reminded her often that hard times do not last forever, but character does. Over time, the house transformed into a place of healing. It was not free from problems, but it was grounded in honesty and love. The children learned by watching that dignity comes from effort, that family stands together, and that even after life breaks you, it is still possible to rebuild, slowly and with purpose. As the years passed, the children grew into their teenage years, shaped by the quiet sacrifices they witnessed every day. Life had taught them lessons early, lessons many of their classmates had not yet faced. They understood the weight of responsibility, the value of time, and the meaning of hard work. School became more than just education for them. It was a pathway to stability. The grandparents encouraged discipline and routine, making sure homework was completed and respect was never forgotten. The mother, despite her exhaustion, remained involved in every small detail of their lives, attending school meetings when she could, and reminding them constantly that their future mattered. The home was modest, but it was filled with structure and purpose. By the time the siblings completed high school, they were eager to contribute financially. They did not dream of luxury or shortcuts. Instead, they looked for honest work that would allow them to support the family. That is when they found jobs at a local bakery. The work began before sunrise with the smell of dough and warmth filling the air. At first, their tasks were simple: cleaning, arranging shelves, helping customers. But they approached everything with seriousness and respect. Over time, they learned how to prepare bread, manage inventory, and interact with customers. The bakery became more than a workplace. It became a training ground for discipline and teamwork. The owner of the bakery noticed their commitment. Unlike many workers who complained or cut corners, the siblings showed consistency and care. He began teaching them the deeper aspects of the business: how to calculate costs, handle suppliers, and maintain quality. Every lesson added confidence to their abilities. The mother watched quietly, proud yet cautious, knowing how easily hope could be broken. The grandparents, too, observed from a distance, offering encouragement and reminders to stay humble. Those years were not easy. Long hours, physical exhaustion, and limited pay tested their patience. Yet the siblings shared a silent understanding that this phase was necessary. They saved what little they could, avoided unnecessary expenses, and focused on learning. Slowly, a dream began forming, not spoken loudly but felt deeply. They believed that one day their effort would create something of their own. In that belief, they found motivation, strength, and the courage to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. After nearly 2 years of working at the bakery, learning every detail from the front counter to the back kitchen, the brother and sister began to realize that their quiet dream was no longer impossible. It started with late-night conversations at the grandparents' dining table, spoken in low voices so no one would feel pressured or worried. They talked about savings, about risks, and about the fear of failure. They knew they did not come from wealth, and one wrong step could send them back to where they started. But they also understood something important. If they waited for the perfect moment, it might never come. With careful planning and guidance from the bakery owner, they decided to take a chance on themselves. The process was slow and exhausting. They searched for a small space they could afford, even if it was far from ideal. The location was modest, tucked between older shops with worn floors and aging equipment. But to them, it represented opportunity. They invested every saved dollar, purchasing second-hand ovens and basic supplies. There was no grand opening, no large crowd, just a simple sign and the courage to unlock the door on the first morning. The mother stood quietly in the corner, holding back tears, overwhelmed by pride and fear at the same time. The grandparents arrived early, dressed neatly, their presence a silent blessing. The first days were difficult. Customers were few, mistakes were made, and doubts crept in. Some nights the siblings wondered if they had made the wrong decision. But they remembered where they came from, and that memory pushed them forward. They focused on quality, honesty, and consistency. Slowly, people returned. Word spread. The bakery became known not for luxury, but for warmth and sincerity. Regular customers began greeting them by name, asking about their family, sharing small moments of connection. For the siblings, the bakery was more than a business. It was proof that struggle could lead to purpose. Every loaf of bread carried their history, loss, sacrifice, and perseverance. For the mother and grandparents, it was a moment of quiet victory. Years of hardship had not been wasted. They had built something real, something lasting, with nothing but effort, belief, and the strength to keep going when life tried to stop them. As months passed, the bakery slowly found its footing, and with each passing week, the siblings gained confidence not just in their business, but in themselves. The early mornings and late nights continued, but now the exhaustion carried a different feeling: purpose. They learned how to balance quality with cost, how to listen to customers, and how to adapt when something didn't work. Some days were profitable, others barely broke even. But they no longer panicked. They had learned patience from their grandparents and resilience from their mother. Every challenge reminded them that nothing meaningful grows without struggle. The bakery became a place where effort was visible, where mistakes were lessons instead of failures. The mother continued working in other people's homes, though now she carried a quiet sense of relief. She no longer felt like she was only surviving. She was contributing to something that had a future. In the evenings, she would stop by the bakery, sometimes just to sit and watch her children work. She noticed how confidently they spoke to customers, how responsibly they handled money, and how respectfully they treated everyone who walked in. It healed parts of her that had been broken for years. The grandparents also visited often, sitting quietly in a corner observing without interfering. Their pride was not loud, but it was deep. They had lived long enough to understand that true success is slow and earned. The siblings began to dream again cautiously. They talked about improving the shop, expanding the menu, and one day easing their mother's workload. They did not rush these dreams, knowing how fragile progress could be. Instead, they focused on consistency, showing up every day, maintaining standards, and protecting what they had built. The bakery slowly became more than a business. It became a symbol in their community. People saw two young individuals who had built something from nothing, supported by family rather than privilege. Yet life was not finished testing them. New responsibilities emerged, unexpected expenses, health concerns of aging grandparents, and the pressure of maintaining growth. The siblings understood that success brings its own weight. They were no longer just children helping their family. They were providers, decision-makers, and leaders. As they stood at this stage of their journey, they knew one thing clearly. Their story was still unfolding. The hardest chapters were behind them, but the most meaningful ones were yet to come. As stability slowly settled into their lives, the siblings began facing a new kind of challenge, learning how to protect what they had built. Success, even modest success, brought expectations. Suppliers demanded timely payments, customers expected consistency, and the pressure to grow loomed quietly in the background. The brother and sister often sat together after closing hours, reviewing numbers, discussing mistakes, and deciding their next steps. These conversations were no longer about survival, but about responsibility. They understood that one careless decision could undo years of effort. This awareness matured them quickly, pushing them to think beyond the present moment and consider the long-term future of their family. The mother played a steady, supportive role during this phase. She no longer worked herself to exhaustion, but she remained involved, helping at the bakery when needed, managing small tasks, and offering emotional guidance. Her experiences had taught her caution, and she often reminded her children that growth should never come at the cost of peace. She encouraged them to move slowly, to save rather than spend, and to remember that their true success lay in staying together. Her voice carried wisdom earned through pain, and the siblings listened carefully. At home, the grandparents' health began to show signs of decline. The grandfather tired more easily, and the grandmother's steps grew slower. These changes weighed heavily on the family. The siblings realized that their responsibilities were expanding, not just as business owners but as caretakers. They adjusted their schedules, making time for medical appointments and daily support. Though the reality was difficult, it strengthened their sense of purpose. Everything they were building now felt connected to the past sacrifices and to the future they hoped to secure. The bakery continued to earn respect in the community. It became known as a place run with honesty, where quality was valued over speed and people were treated with dignity. Customers returned not only for the food, but for the atmosphere of sincerity. The siblings stood at a crossroads, aware that life had brought them far from where they began. Yet they also sensed that the journey was not complete. Ahead lay choices that would test their unity, their values, and their strength. The final chapters of their story were approaching, shaped by love, responsibility, and the lessons of a life rebuilt from hardship. Time moved quietly, and with it came moments that forced the family to pause and reflect on how far they had come. One evening, after closing the bakery, the siblings decided to buy their first car together. It was not expensive or new, but it represented freedom. Freedom from depending on others, freedom to manage deliveries, and freedom to care for their family more easily. When they brought the car home, the mother stood silently, her eyes filling with tears she did not try to hide. To her, that car symbolized more than transportation. It was proof that her children were no longer trapped by the circumstances that once controlled her life. The grandparents were invited to sit inside the car first. The grandfather ran his hand gently across the dashboard, remembering years when even small comforts felt unreachable. The grandmother smiled softly, whispering prayers of gratitude. In that quiet moment, no one spoke because words felt unnecessary. Each of them understood the weight of that achievement. It was not about material success, it was about dignity earned honestly. The siblings felt a deep responsibility settle within them. They were no longer just chasing stability. They were preserving a legacy built through sacrifice. As weeks passed, the bakery continued to run smoothly, and the siblings managed their time carefully between work and family. They made sure the grandparents were never left alone for long, checking on them daily, listening to their stories, and honoring their guidance. The mother, now calmer and more grounded, found herself finally breathing without fear. She began to talk about the future with hope instead of anxiety. She dreamed of simple things, peaceful mornings, shared meals, and watching her children grow into balanced adults. Yet beneath the calm, the family understood that life remains uncertain. The grandparents' health required attention, the business demanded care, and the future still held unanswered questions. But unlike before, these uncertainties did not feel overwhelming. The family had learned how to stand together through loss, humiliation, and hardship. They had rebuilt their lives slowly, brick by brick, without shortcuts. As they moved forward, they carried a shared understanding. Whatever challenges remained, they would face them united. The final chapter was not about what they gained, but about who they had become through everything they endured. As the years continued to unfold, the family settled into a life that, while still modest, was filled with meaning and quiet satisfaction. The bakery remained steady, never turning into something grand or extravagant, but consistently providing enough to support everyone with dignity. The siblings learned that true success was not measured by rapid growth or public recognition, but by stability, honesty, and peace of mind. They chose not to expand recklessly, remembering too well how fragile security could be. Instead, they focused on balance between work and family, ambition and gratitude. The grandparents, now in the final season of their lives, spent more time resting, often sitting together in silence, watching the world move slowly around them. They found comfort in knowing that their grandchildren were capable, grounded, and kind. Everything they had hoped to pass down, values, discipline, and resilience, was visible in the way the siblings lived. The grandmother often said that wealth comes and goes, but character remains. The grandfather, quieter than ever, simply nodded, content in the knowledge that his life's efforts had not been wasted. The mother, reflecting on her journey, finally allowed herself to feel at peace. She no longer defined herself by loss or suffering. Though the memories of her past never disappeared, they no longer held power over her. She had chosen courage when it mattered most, and that choice reshaped her children's future. Watching them work together, care for their grandparents, and move through life with humility filled her with a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that everything she had endured had led to this moment of calm. This story does not end with celebration or triumph, but with quiet strength. It is the story of an American family that faced loss, exploitation, and hardship, yet refused to surrender their dignity. It is a story of grandparents who became pillars, a mother who chose self-respect over comfort, and children who transformed struggle into purpose. Their lives were not perfect, but they were real. And in choosing honesty, patience, and unity, they proved that even after life breaks you, it is still possible to rebuild something meaningful, slowly, deliberately, and with heart. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real, emotional journeys of courage, resilience, and hope, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Your support helps us share inspiring stories every week, reminding us all that no matter the struggle, brighter days are ahead.